Anti-Semitism in the 21st century is unfortunately not a new thing, but when it comes to specific places around Europe, which one would probably not want to expect, there are still some crazy things happening. So what has happened pretty much, you could say yesterday, or basically around midnight from yesterday to today, in Amsterdam, there was a soccer match between Maccabi Tel Aviv and Ajax. Maccabi Tel Aviv is, of course, an Israeli football club or a football team, soccer team for Americans. And while the Israelis lost pretty hard in the match itself, 5-0, when what happened after was pretty disturbing. Basically, uh, oh, Brazil says it's pronounced Ajax. Okay. Oh, because it's Dutch, I guess.
Yeah.
So basically, right after that, basically when people started going home, thugs pretty much started hunting down Jews. There is no real other way to say it. If you look up, Razi says, thanks for mentioning this score. For basically the reason is Razi was at the match. Luckily, nothing happened to him. He was able to leave early. He actually didn't even know it was happening. But yeah, basically there are videos all over X if you want to see them. I don't really want to play them, but terrible things were happening. There is a video of someone getting run over. There are videos of people just being on the ground, getting basically beaten up. There are videos of people throwing people into the canals. So real, just terrible situation all around. So today we'll talk about, we'll talk a little bit about what has exactly happened, the response, both basically from the local authorities, from the Prime Minister of Netherlands, from people around the world, and also I think a certain amount of very disturbing sort of blaming the Jews response we have also seen. Welcome to the reality show. Joining me today is Marco and Richard. Marco, when did you find about this, and what were your first reactions?
Well, it was this morning as soon as I looked at the news. And of course, it's not it's not surprising the disturbance goes against pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas people against Jews, but the kind of historic parallels of this one, we are roughly at 86 years to the day from the Kristallnacht. There was the Nazi Germany deliberately attacking Jewish residences or businesses,
Stores, yeah.
and attacking Jews all around. And this was 86 years ago. We're not talking that long ago. It's within human memory, within living memory. But still, we are here in 2024 talking about another pogrom, another deliberate attack unleashed against Jews. We've seen little, if you like, trial during the student revolts, the student protests in the campuses last summer. And this turned out to have been just effectively the training camp for trying to push the envelope and see how anti-Semitic, what's the appetite for anti-Semitism in the West. And it turns out it is frighteningly high. As I said, 2024, I would never, ever imagine 3 years ago we would have this level of anti-Semitism, this open call for killing of Jews. We're not even talking about protesting or going against the action of the Israeli state. We're actually talking about targeting Jews because they're Jews. And we also seen how the media have reacted to it. We'll mention in a minute, but the issues that the fact that there was a football match is totally irrelevant. It could have been, bear dancing or cockfighting. Doesn't matter why they were there. They were there because people have got the right to travel freely wherever they want, even if they want to go and watch a film. It doesn't matter what the event was. It's got nothing to do with football, nothing to do with sport as such. Although we've seen a few days ago the sport has got lots to answer for it, and the bodies behind it are absolutely guilty of anti-Semitism as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about the specific targeting in just a bit, but you have to realize it was basically people realizing, hey, there's an Israeli team here playing, meaning Israelis will come, meaning Israelis are most likely Jews. We want to target them. It was again because some people might and we'll also talk about sort of maybe hooliganism in general. This wasn't some sort of people just started randomly going crazy or something like that. It was specifically targeting the fans because what you always have, what you oftentimes have with soccer fans, they have scarves of the specific team, so they were specifically targeting the people. First, they were targeting specifically people with who could be identified as the fans of the team, meaning they were probably Israelis, meaning they were probably Jews. And then basically they just tried to get anyone they could.
Yeah, it was literally a pogrom. Yeah, there's no other way of describing it.
And going up to strangers and demanding to know where they're from if they suspected they might be Jewish. Some of them had to, get their passports out to prove they were from somewhere else in order to avoid being beaten up, which is another example of this. I think one of the comparisons that you just made there with the Kristallnacht, for example, one of the important elements of Kristallnacht is that it didn't come out of nowhere. It was a gradual thing which built up and to the crescendo of that, and then of course beyond. And it was the belittling and the willful ignoring and the excusing and the fact that authorities chose to look the other way repeatedly in the build up to that made it such a sudden and dramatic thing to everybody else who had been ignoring it or kept from them. And of course, in this day and age, when news is so easily transmitted, there is no excuse for anyone with open eyes should see the amount of anti-Semitism that has been exposed by October the 7th, but existed prior to it, brought to light as a result of all of the marches and the reaction of authorities and the way in which they're policed and the way in which groups are treated when they are if you want to call it its politest protesting and at its worst elements, out and out despicable violence, assault and attempt at worse. So yeah, all of that's in this. I suppose, you mentioned if you're talking about pronunciation, I wanted to say that it's pronounced football, not soccer. But that is kind of where my knowledge of football begins and ends. But it does also back up Marco's point, which is this isn't about football, even though there have been other matches recently, and I'm sure we'll refer to those in a minute, where sporting events are often arenas where people know the cameras are on them and they play up to those cameras. And it becomes a heightened, we saw that during the Olympics as well, a heightened example of people making, overstepping the line and making out and out racist comments, sometimes getting away with it, sometimes not, depending again on whether the law is implemented fairly across both sides and whether there is a gradual normalization of anti-Semitism, which makes people shrug at it. And that in itself is the most terrifying element of this, the way in which it's shaken off.
So just so people know, basically, last time I checked, the big problems were basically when this started happening is we didn't know about a lot of people. Some people were missing, some people were in the hospitals. Luckily, I believe everybody is accounted for, so no one is missing or anything, because there were early reports of some people possibly getting kidnapped. Luckily, nothing like that happened. And also, I believe all the people that did end up in hospital are basically already out now and are doing good. So overall, no one died, thankfully. And I think last time I checked, around 60 people were arrested. It might be more now. And I think most of the people are basically back home in Israel because Netanyahu has basically, or is Israel itself, I'm not sure if it was directly Netanyahu, have sent I think 2 planes into Netherlands, into Amsterdam, to basically make sure everyone gets home safe. Because there was a big problem that basically, even though the sort of, the night itself has ended, there were still basically people. There was still possibility that people are actively looking for Jews. There are videos of them basically breaking into hotels, uh, lo- basically, yeah, doing everything they can just to find more Jews, as you've mentioned. Yeah, looking for passports, and something that's important. I guess sort of 2 aspects to talk about. Uh, Sort of, I guess we are starting on to talk about basically how people manage to turn it into that it's actually the Jews' fault. And basically, some of the things that people were saying is the day before there was a lot of basically hooliganism. I think there are videos of the Maccabi fans basically like tearing down Palestinian flags, just sort of like that general uh, like making a mess, which is a problem. That's a bad thing to do. But it's not unusual when it comes to sort of like hooligans, basically, when they, trash the neighborhood. It's a terrible thing that happens. It's unfortunate. But the solution is, police actually getting involved and just enforcing the law. The solution is not, because some people did that, now we go like running around and trying to find and beat up or even kill, like running over just random people because some people similar to them were doing something bad. So maybe we can talk a little bit about this. Marco, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't believe at all in the narrative this was caused by whatever violent scenes that
Oh,
occurred.
maybe I should already bring it into, because we do have evidence that this was planned. So by the people who started doing it. So even if there was no hooliganism, it would most likely still happen. Basically, the Amsterdam police was informed beforehand, and they it looks like they didn't take the threat seriously. There was the big. If you look at the videos, police is almost nowhere to be around. It took a while until basically people were mobilized and people were accounted for and people were safe.
Yes. Whatever happened the day before, the hours before, is totally irrelevant to what happens after because even, I mean, the authorities of Amsterdam knew very well who was going to be in Amsterdam. It were people from Israel, fans of a football club that were going to see a match in Amsterdam. So they would have known by then that allowing a Palestinian flag to be flown would have been a provocation, effectively. And frankly, we could argue at this point that the so-called PLO flag, the so-called Palestinian flags, are just another version of the swastika, really, because we know what those flags hide really behind. Behind those flags are the people who support October the 7th, the people who want the destruction of Israel, and are the people who have committed exactly the stuff that happened last night. The people who targeted Jews because they were Jews. So at this point, talking about pro-Palestinians, talking about the Palestinian flag is a total red herring. It's just we know, just like the brown shirts were Nazis trying to destroy people. These pro-Palestinians can no longer hide behind the veneer of, oh, we just exercise our right to speech. No, because this has become a truly 100% violent movement, and a movement that mirrors exactly what Hamas is. As you mentioned, there was proof in the open community, open source intelligence, had information that there were plots, there were people organizing and trying to disrupt the event. They knew that the Jews were in town and they wanted to hit them. They wanted to make the point. So much so that the kind of technique they used were the same as Hamas. They attacked Jews and they broadcasted themselves on social media because they are proud of it and because they want to show. And you never hear somebody shouting, "Oh, Maccabi's crap," or "You lost, you losers." No, they all shout, "This is Gaza. That's how you should feel about it, and go back to Israel, whatever. You IDF, Jews, and all this kind of stuff." So the pure anti-Semitic intention of these actions is undeniable. And as I said, the authorities chose not to deal with it. There were plenty of evidence. There were plenty of people who informed them and made the point this is going to end up badly, and it ended up badly. We've seen, 8 years ago how badly it can get.
And every element of what made this so hideous is it's all about force. It's about forcing people to say free Palestine, throwing them in the canal and making them say it before they're, allowed to get out and that kind of thing. It's about humiliating. It's not about making an argument even though that this is, these are just people in a city they're visiting, and this backfilling of the narrative that implies that it started with the behavior of the Maccabi supporters is just nonsense based on the level of planning that was involved and the fact that there was lots of scooter gangs all over the place setting out to track down Jews and beat them up, essentially, and because of the knowledge that they were going to be there. I think what I've seen from the reaction to it from people like the Prime Minister, I'm going to pronounce his name now and risk being pilloried, but Dick Schoof, the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, he was talking about how ashamed he was and all of that. And of course, this is always how it's dealt with, isn't it? It's always reaction is always emotional. It's always about sympathy and hand wringing and isn't it sad and terrible that, and aren't we appalled that, and isn't it a tragedy that, and isn't it a trauma that, and it doesn't matter whether it's a terrorist attack or something of this nature. That's always the focus on it, not what is the cause of this, not isn't it terrible it happened, but what caused it to happen, who were the perpetrators of it, and why. Because without tackling that head on, this is why it gets ever worse. This is why it mounts behind the scenes, accumulates, and reaches who knows what level. And we can only hope that it doesn't get worse from here, and that this is a warning sign. But that will remain to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, there is there is again something very unique about this. I'm just looking at the chat, and the fact is we simply haven't seen something like that. Pretty much, yeah, ever really. I mean, maybe although I might be wrong. Maybe after 9/11, I can imagine something. Also, some specific, Arab or Muslim communities were targeted. But again, this is at least, for more recent example, when I was actually alive, when the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened, we didn't see anything like that. We didn't see like Russian communities like getting targeted and just if there is like a match somewhere, they go specifically for the Russians. We simply haven't seen anything close to that. The fact that you could have again, those people might disagree with what Israel is doing. Israel is a democratic nation where a large amount of people disagree with what is currently happening. They might be even against that. They might even it's similar to if you guys remember, there was a video during the BLM riots when someone was yelling, like a brick came through a window, and she was like, "Well, I support you, and another brick came through a window. So yeah, it's something really disturbing, the fact that they are targeted just because they are associated with that. They might not have anything to deal with it, but just because they are Israelis, just because they are Jews, they are targets. And again, I think, Mark, you mentioned that there is no different word for this than pogroms, because yeah, it's pretty much it's exactly that. There is it's very hard to call it anything differently. And the fact that the reporting has been, yeah, just when you I usually, especially when it comes to Israeli topics, I oftentimes focus on the Israeli newspapers like Ynet, Times of Israel, and it's insane to see the difference of reporting when you compare, for example, Times of Israel and, for example, the BBC. It's the way the sort of the facts, the way the all situations are presented, pretty much in everyone. They make sure to mention, whoa, 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 this wasn't just random, hunting of Jews. The hooligans did something before, trying to, you could say, well, it's just bringing context. While it very much seems like it's trying to, justify it, to provide some sort of, understandable problem with it. Marco, what do you think?
No, you're totally right. And the way it's been reported in some places, it's absolutely disgraceful. Some people trying to fudge it as hooliganism. I mean, it's got something to do with two opposing teams, that they had the scuffle in the street. Some other people make it look like, oh, it's just the youth having a bit of a row. All this kind of attitude, no understanding, no understanding, no recognizing and admitting what's happening. It's part of the petrol on the fire, isn't it? We have an issue here. We have had an issue which has been exposed for the last year and a few months, and people are still denied it's there. Why are they doing that? Well, there is a report on ELNet about how Hamas, uh, people directly linked to Hamas, are actually funding networks of disinformation and supporting charities and supporting movements in the West. Happens in Italy, happens in France, happens in Germany, happens here in Britain. You don't need to be in the intelligence service to work out that there is an undercurrent of some Hamas sympathizers, perhaps even directly funded by Iran, who are pouring money into charities, pouring money into, when I call charities, non-profit organization, who are supporting and providing, organizing all those marches, all these pro-Hamas, pro-hate, anti-Israel marches that we've seen for the last over a year. These things keep occurring because somebody keeps steering it up. And who's got interest in steering it up? Well, you just have to guess. It's certainly not Israel. It's certainly not the pro-Israeli people that have got any interest in funding these movements. So, you're left with just one choice. Either somebody who doesn't like the West, who wants to weaken it from within, you could think Russia, China, or usual suspect, or Iran, who's literally directly behind Hamas itself. Iran, who's trying to find a war without using weapons, but just weaponizing the kind of freedom of speech we have here, and painting, pretending that freedom of speech is actually being exercised when it's actually incitement to violence and hate, which has been preached on a constant basis, constantly. And it's been reported by various papers, because the people who are behind it, people who work in these papers, believe the narrative, believe the fact that the Palestinians are the population which has been oppressed, and blah 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 blah, and they don't question it. Partially because their interest correspond. They are usually leftists. They hate the West, they hate capitalism, hate our society, hate freedom, and what the Palestinians are pushing is exactly that. Islamism is a dictatorship based on faith. So what's best? The enemy of my enemy is my friend, isn't it? So they align themselves with the pro-Hamas people, and they carry their narrative. But when it comes to it, Iran will, or the people behind it, will carry out the promise that after the Jews are dealt with, they're going to move towards the big Satan of the West. They make it quite clear. They are very clear in their ideology, Islamic ideology, that if you're not a follower of their ghosts, then you're an enemy. So you either convert or you're dead.
I think that
Yeah,
sorry.
sorry, Richard, just quickly, because someone in the chat was saying that a Russian sports team were banned in Europe It's really interesting that someone would draw such a parallel, because at least one thing I know about is that I think it's KHL, if I'm not mistaken, which is like a Russian sort of like NHL, sort of like a hockey league. But the problem with that is that that Hockey League was actively doing propaganda for Putin. So, trying to draw parallels between, something that is actively doing propaganda for Russia, which is engaging in in a active war against a free nation, or relatively free nation, and comparing that to Israel, who is engaging in basically protecting individual rights of their own citizens by trying to get rid of terrorist groups that attacked Israel just a year ago. And even the connection that there is a one Israeli team that is playing somewhere in Europe, and that's like drawing parallels between that is like uh, it's a stretch, to say the least. But sorry, Richard.
That's all right, no worries. I think what's shocking about this, really, to any of us who comment on this channel, including the wider team of commentators and a lot of our audience, of course, as well as Israelis generally, is just how unshocking this is. So when you hear some of these people reacting to it, it's either phony shock, or it's they've deliberately shoved their head in the sand, or up their backsides, in order not to see what is apparent. So when, for example, I think the cargo planes that they were sending going to send, what were in the end stood down when it became apparent that this wasn't as terrible as it might have first appeared, terrible though it was. I'm not understating that at all. But of course, that's not overreaction. That is simply the recognition of the extent to which Jews are under attack at the moment across the world, all over the place, and that any one of these incidents could go even further into the kind of violence that would demand them to be rescued en masse, even from a European country. And that is, of course, dreadful. And the fact that Israel had to announce to its own citizens abroad that they would be able to use photocopies of their own passports, or they'll be able to use other ID in order to catch flights to come home, particularly when those passports had been, stolen by the mob on the streets of Amsterdam. In terms of the reporting, I just wanted to refer to some of the dreadful phrases I saw this described as. I saw it described as pro-hooligan versus Dutch youths. Now, you have to drop one hell of a lot of context, and you have to assume a hell of a lot of imported context and agenda into that to write a sentence that labels the two groups in such a manner. Even the more common way of describing the kind of violence we saw against Jews is to use a very generic term of men, which sits there on its own as a particularly empty phrase that announces how little you've chosen to analyze what the problem is. They may later on refer to the fact that it's men of Arabic origin, or whatever phrase they choose to adopt, but they mean Muslims who wanted to attack Jews, and they wanted to use this as their excuse en masse. So that that's what defines it as a pogrom.
Just quickly, someone in the chat says TDS crew is on again, so I'm glad Marco and Richard have become TDS just by associating with me. It's always great to see. We have a few super chats. So first, thank you, Jonathan, for your super chat. Thank you, PC, for your super chat. PC says, gentlemen, you see now why Israel is vital for Jewish survival. Yeah, maybe we can talk a little bit about that, because that's you guys know, but some people might not know. I really like badges. I like to wear badges on my jacket. And since last year, usually I just have my Greater Hungary badge because I'm a fan of history and I'm a nut, so that's why I have that. But I've also bought Ukrainian and Israeli badges, and so now I have them there also. But I'm planning to go to London in a month or so, and to be honest, I'm seriously considering, if I should really wear that badge. I'm definitely I'm not shying from my support of Israel. I'm definitely not, embarrassed for it or anything. But I don't want to name specific people, but we had people host on this channel who have been, in some cases, harassed, in some cases, actually beat up, just not even because some people were definitely sure they were Jews, but just because they looked Jewish. So you can only imagine how far would you go with actually having a flag. That's something I believe Razi has mentioned yesterday, that basically the sort of advice from the I think the Israeli Foreign Office is basically, if you're traveling abroad, don't wear any identifiable things that would suggest to people that you are Israeli or that you are Jewish. Don't wear a scarf if you of the team that is Israeli. So yeah, well, for a long time, or fundamentally, or sort of from the long-term perspective, I think having like a specifically Jewish state is problematic from the sort of rights respecting way. There shouldn't be like a special place for certain people. That it should be a place for all people. But the fact that we are at a state that basically, yeah, just by, if you are out of Israel, just by some people associating you with the Jews, you will get beat up, you will get yelled at. In this case, after the match, people will just run after you. That's scary. Marco?
Yeah, it is scary. It is scary because partially because the very state is supposed to protect the Jews, Israel, it's kind of playing along with the people who hate them. It's kind of they. I frankly don't understand why they keep engaging with an organization like UEFA, for example, which proved themselves to be totally against the interests of the Jewish people. The UEFA is the very organization who gave World Cup to Qatar. UEFA is the same organization which allowed Paris Saint-Germain to show.
Technically, that was FIFA, I think, but
What was it? FIFA? Well,
but yes,
it's the same
they're
lot.
similar bunch, but yeah.
That's right. It's FIFA. But UEFA has been particularly involved with anti-Semitic stances. They are supposed not to be political in the execution of the matches in whatever they do. But every time there is something against Israel, that seems to be let through. The other day in a match, Paris Saint-Germain and Madrid, there was a massive banner pro-Israel, pro-Palestinian, with all the typical Hamas iconography on it. And it was a massive one. It was like reported to be like 50 by 20 meters, which is 150 by 60 feet. I mean, this is not a terrorist kitchen towel. This is not a flag. It's a massive banner which makes a point by effectively standing on the side of Hamas, which was allowed to stand there. And, nobody said anything. Macron, despite his crocodile tears today, oh, this is a terrible event, he allowed it to happen. Nobody was punished for it. And these organizations, frankly, if I were Israel, I would ban the teams from taking part to events organized by people like UEFA or FIFA. If the case is, well, it's not an issue because Israel probably will never qualify for a World Cup. But
You're going to anger the boss if you say that.
I know, but it's gonna. It's like being part of the UN. It's the same issue. You cannot be part of an organization that is effectively designed to trip you over and make your life impossible. And part of it is this acceptance that anti-Semitism will be there, and so you just deal with it. Well, it's ridiculous. But we're seeing this so much. Partly is lack of education. Just the fact. I mean, the irony that this event occurred in the same city, probably not far away from where Anne Frank was hiding when the Nazis were in Holland. And they, here, or towards on the day of Armistice Day, when we remember the fallen people fought for freedom, we remember the victims of the wars. We have a plan, the student march pro-Palestinian. I mean, this would never have happened a few years ago. Only 2 years ago, this would have been unthinkable. Partially because they don't really know what they're talking about. Today, some of the organizers talked about, yeah, we want to disrupt this event, which is designed to remember the death of WW2. It's like, no, if in the first place we're starting for WW1, that's why it's only 11th day or the 11th month at 11 hours. But they don't understand history. They don't know anything about it, apart from what they're told by the people who hold the leashes. And it's the same thing that make them pull down a Greek flag, thinking they're Israelis. They don't know anything apart from the hate that there has been, the catchphrases of hate which has been instilled into them, and they repeat freely when they remember. It's like the river to the sea. You remember the old lady in the middle of the street, not even knowing what she's talking about, not knowing what sea, what river. They could never even point out where the West Bank is on a map, let alone Israel, or where probably they live. This kind of ignorance should not be left unchallenged. You cannot allow these people to take the microphone and start spewing hate just because they can. And part of it is allowing them to do it.
And I think it's that allowing them to do it, which is gradually crept and accelerated very quickly over time, because you start off with just symbols, and then you end up with, you shouldn't have flags or protest banners at sports matches. And before you know where you are, you've got this 50-meter banner across the whole virtual end of a stadium, with the blood splattered over it. To make this hideous point, and still no punishment for it. So what is the next stage beyond that? It's this endless pushing back of the boundary, which I think is that's part of the problem here, is the cowardice, not to enforce the law when it comes to the kind of groups like this that have been getting away with it for so long, because of that cowardice. That is only leading to a bigger problem, and it's not going to go away because you hide it and evade it. It does need to be, needs to be faced head on. And I think if you look at some of the footage, and I refer again to people being demanded that they get their passports out and show who they were before that person decides whether or not they should be beaten up. So you show me what symbol, what country name you've got. I decide, therefore, that you're Jewish, and that person, by that mechanism, chooses to beat them up. Now, that is just racism and despicable. There aren't words for it, are they? But you've got to focus on that, and strip away all the other elements that people will try and distract you with, particularly those about hooliganism and stuff like that. Hooliganism and the kind of tribal violence that comes with football supporters on occasion in certain places, only certain amounts of them, is hideous in its own right. All tribal violence like that, and brain dead non-thinking that leads to people smashing stuff up is to be deplored. But don't confuse that with what we're looking at here.
We also have a super chat from Henry. Thank you so much. He says, "What will and now I'll butcher the name, Geert Wilders and the government do?" I believe is he the actual prime minister right now?
No,
Oh, he's not.
He wasn't allowed to be prime minister.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
He's not somebody who necessarily, he's got his problems. He's a strong anti-immigration, problematic person, to say the least. He's in charge of the Party for Freedom, as the name of the party. But of course, be wary of all names that include the word freedom. not just freedom, but all the claims that people stick to party names, particularly in Europe, because they often don't relate to it at all. But obviously, he is one of those people who's making this point that I'm making, but that doesn't mean that he's making it in the best way or that he is the right person to make it. And it needs to be made from the mainstream. It needs to not be on the fringes, but it needs to be in proportion to the nature of the problem, without resorting to racism of a different kind, which I'm not saying he necessarily did that in this case, but sometimes people who support him do tend to do that. So
yeah, he's in that sort of like a mixed category of I mean, I think he is described as far right, but it's oftentimes really hard to specifically say what that means. But in I think the reason why Enring brings him up in this case is I believe he's very pro-Israeli. I think and again, the motivation for being pro-Israeli might also be problematic, but I think that's why you might hear him having the strongest sort of language when it comes to this condemnation, calling it out for what it is. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, you can't deny the fact, a clock a broken clock is right twice a day, but his point about identify Islam as the root of most of the problems we are facing now is actually not wrong. Now, as it becomes just a racial thing, it is wrong. But naming the problem, nobody else is doing it. And we're just living with the consequences. And every time there is an attack, every time there is a bombing, every time children are killed, we just, oh, it's a shame, isn't it? It's such a disgraceful thing to happen. It's such a shame, and nobody ever acts on the causes of it, or even identify what the problem is.
but beyond saying something like Jewish people must feel safe in the Netherlands, as if that is something that needs to be stated as a policy, and it's got to the point where you have to state it as a policy. It suggests you've got a bigger problem than you're acknowledging.
Yeah, I do have the problem with the phrase "a clock is twice right twice 2 times a day" or whatever, because it's an truth is an epistemological issue, so you cannot be just like randomly right. You have to actually have the right process to arrive to the truth for the truth to actually be valid. But that's my disclaimer. Just quickly moving on to the next super chat. We have a super chat from Alex. Thank you so much. She says maybe I think Netherlands' strategic concept is that Islam isn't really a threat. 300 jihadis arrange a pogrom and it doesn't alert your signals intelligence. So again, from my understanding, they knew something was going to happen, and they pretty much have decided to not really act on it, or at least we haven't seen. And we've heard from, I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but we've heard from the mayor of Amsterdam that I think it's a she, or they strongly condemn what has happened, and yeah, that was basically the statement. But the fact is, nothing was done. Well, not even when it was happened, because probably when it started happening, they've started acting. But the problem was that there was no preparation ahead of time. There was no making sure that nothing happens ahead of time, despite the most likely available information that something will happen. Anything you guys like to say on that?
I just wanted to add that this is not sophisticated, but it is coordinated thuggery. And it's the fact that it's coordinated, even among lots of low-level thugs, it means that it needs a lot of contact, online or whatever. It creates a lot of chatter between those people, which is your precursor to knowing that it's going to happen from an intelligence perspective, and therefore picking up on it and knowing that you need to have enough police and authorities in place to nip it in the bud. So the fact that it's not super sophisticated, like not sophisticated by which I mean things like of a pager level type preparation or whatever. It doesn't mean that there isn't forewarning that shouldn't be ignored. And your point's valid. I think that if you've got so much of that going on that you don't notice this or choose not to pick it out of the morass of negative anti-Jewish chatter that there already is, then again, that is the problem that you're really facing, the one you need to be identified and resolved.
And frankly, as I mentioned earlier on, you don't need to be an expert in intelligence in order to work out, well, we got an Israeli team coming to the Netherlands. We know we have a problem with Islam. That's why we got a party against it. It's the largest party, largest political party. So we have an issue. Put one and one together. What's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen when the faction that support Hamas will come into contact and they will decide to come into contact with Israeli? I mean, it's not rocket science, is it?
And of course, the police were putting Jewish people, putting Israeli supporters of Maccabi onto buses so that they could ship them out in groups back to their hotels and keep them safe that way. So that is trying to, treat the symptom without treating the perpetrators of it. I think I read that 62 people were arrested, but only 10 were still being held, which suggests that it was a pretty quick release into the wild again, whether we're on bail or through choosing not to pursue it further. And therefore, I don't particularly think that this has been recognised and to its full extent yet in terms of going after the perpetrators.
Just quickly, someone in the chat says this channel has UK in the name, not Israel. Israel is just a foreign country and not a problem. Neither, for that matter, is Palestine. So I think it's important to remember that sort of like problems anywhere or sort of like injustices. I think it's a Martin Luther King quote, right? Injustice anywhere is threat to justice everywhere, or something similar to that. And I think the fact is that trying to shut down your mind, shut down your eyes, and say, well, it's just happening. It's just happening over there. It's not our problem. Is absolutely discarding the fact that it's not just there. The only reason why in some cases it's just there is because they didn't get through there yet. When it comes to nations like Iran, they want to go after America. It's just Israel is in the way currently. When it comes to sort of this type of not hooliganism, but sort of people just randomly going around and killing Jews, it's because currently that's the most that's the most accepted sort of group of people that you can target without much pushback. Actually, people will defend you. It didn't take long for people to start defending these people who just started like hunting around random Jewish people. It's because that's the easiest right now. But looking at it at sort of there's so many good analogies. There's also that poem, they first came for they first came for the Jews, and I didn't speak up because I wasn't a Jew. That's how it happens. And if you don't if you don't care, if you don't speak up when it starts happening, then when it gets to you, it will be too late. So definitely don't ignore that.
I can't fathom how stupid the comment is. It's over there. It's foreign. Really? It's Islamic terrorism, love. I mean, haven't you noticed that they're everywhere? Somebody in the United States has just been arrested. Somebody pushed by Iran. It was an Iranian plot to assassinate Donald Trump. Yeah. It's over there, isn't it? In France, you had a teacher beheaded because he showed a picture of Mohammed. Oh, it's only in France, isn't it? Here in Holland, we have this issue last night. Oh, it's only in Holland, isn't it? I mean, what kind of dumb person wouldn't make the connection what the issue is? It's all over the place. It's probably under your ass as well if you don't look at it. God, that pisses me off.
We also have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says, why are there so many Muslim nations? Many built on plunder land. Israel is Jewish but allows all faiths. Does Saudi or Iran? So first question, why there are so many Muslim nations? Well, it came through conquering and then sort of reconquering, and then you just ended up with Muslims at certain places. And then once we started believing that countryness or sort of nationhood should be based on sort of your ethnic background rather than any ideas, then every single group that just happened to be Muslim got its own country, and that's why you have so many of them that again are not based on any ideas, but are based on the fact that they were there and nothing else.
How many of them are free in individual rights respecting democracies? That's another question.
Not that many. And when it comes to do other countries allow all faiths? I'm not sure specifically about Saudi Arabia, how like respecting it is. I'm assuming not much. Again, even in the sort of Muslim world, you have maybe a bit better nations, but you don't really have any that fundamentally recognize individual rights. Even when you have some, the United Arab Emirates that have like friendly business environment or low taxes or something like that. When it comes to the truly important things about what a country should do, such as the judicial effectiveness, the sort of the ability to elect your own officials, pretty much all Muslim nations are fundamentally flawed when it comes to those, I think, and free speech. Those are like really fundamental things when it comes to what a country should be about.
Yeah, a country shouldn't be about lowering the age of consent for girls so that 6-year-olds can be raped by adult men. You shouldn't have to. A legitimate country doesn't have girls that get harassed by the police because they're not wearing the right clothing to hide themselves and then disappear and kill it. I mean, come on.
We also have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says, a British Jewish guy got attacked trying to help an Israeli. He was asked, are you Jewish? If that's specifically from Amsterdam, I think that might have definitely have happened. Again, it wasn't just Israelis. It was, I think, one of the person who was missing was actually from either from London or from the UK. So we had people coming there from all over the place, not just Israel. Yeah. All right. Anything you'd like to finish up with, Marco?
Oh God. Well, yeah, it's just about the fact that all these tears we're seeing coming from the leader of the West are just that. They're just pretending to be appalled by this event, and then at the same time they have policies. They're pushing policies to stop the supply of weapons and materials to Israel because it's defending itself. So at least be consistent, at least just come out and say that you hate Israel. At least, we all know where you stand, and Israel will be finally convinced of pulling out of the UN and getting rid of all the false friend that they have to deal with. There's no point already being busy, being attacked by savages left, right, and center, and at the same time have to protect yourself from your friends.
And on the streets of Amsterdam, you saw people violently intimidating others into repeating slogans they did not believe. And the force was what they were using as their argument, which is exactly what Hamas have been doing in Gaza. And it exposes their values.
And where can people find you?
You can find all sorts of videos which we've edited on the Briefly Objective. The details are connected below in the description where it says for shorter content, go here. Please like, subscribe and follow and look at those because they're short form taken from this channel, summarized versions, nice and concise with imagery to really make the point in each case and make the arguments super clear. So please check it out.
And you could find me on my YouTube channel, Damned Dan. Maybe I'll finally publish some content there. But until then, and until tomorrow, we'll be back with another episode of the Daily Objective. And also tomorrow, we also have the Philosophy Forum. That's for ARCUK Platinum members and above, and also YouTube Inner Circle members. So if you become a member, you can join that. You'll get an email or you'll get a notification if you are a member on YouTube. Until tomorrow, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you guys for joining me today, and bye-bye.
Bye.